Mom and pop like that holler, grandfather. Do I need to die for this dollar? Now I know why. Mom and pop like that holler. Listen here to the stress. I'm hard full of pain. No money in your pocket and you trying to.
So what is the SPP actually about? The Security and Prosperity Partnership Agreement is not actually a treaty. It's not actually a law. It's a vague dialogue based on so-called shared values that came into effect in 2005 between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. We have to be very clear. The fact that it's not a law, the fact that it's not a treaty, means that it's been able to escape all public scrutiny. Specifically, the SPP will involve the harmonization of 300 areas of regulation, including integration of the military and police forces as part of the war on terror, expansion of temporary worker programs as a means of ensuring low wages, loss of stable unionized jobs with a shift towards more part-time and temporary work, coordination of no-fly lists, biometrics, and border surveillance, including the arming of border guards, expedited resource extraction all across Canada, all across the U.S., all across Mexico, and particularly in Canada. The SPP also involves the harmonization of health and environmental regulations to much lower standards than they already are. And it also involves development of a North American alternative to the Kyoto Protocol. So we have to be very clear. The SPP is a NAFTA plus Homeland Security model that we are rejecting. It's the ongoing continuation of capitalist, colonialist, and imperialist policies that the governments have waged against people for centuries. So we are here to reject it, and we remember in 1994 when NAFTA was passed, the Zapatistas declared war against NAFTA, and thousands of people across the continent today are declaring war against the SPP.
The SPP, Security and Prosperity Partnership, we know this is just new language for something that's very old. We're talking about so-called free trade. We know the legacy of this. We know that under the guise of so-called free trade, that the poor have gotten poorer. We know that this means that the rich have gotten richer. And they've given over, they don't have to worry about public consultations anymore. I don't know anybody who was around 10, 15 years ago and took part in those shams of government consultations. Well, I remember that. I remember sitting in front of those politicians and saying, we're concerned, we're upset, what about labor, what about security, what about environment? And here we are 15 years later, and they don't even need to bother anymore. They just need to recruit 30 corporations, 10 hand-picked from Canada, and they need to sit in back rooms and they can make the deals because they don't need to talk to the people. So it's time, folks. We got to get together. We got to stand up. Because this isn't just about trade. We know this is about migration. This is about secure borders. And we're talking about a continental regulation of over 300 areas. So environmental degradation, a superhighway from the north to the south. We're talking about five-fold development of oil sand productions in Alberta. Do we want this? Do we want to continue environmental degradation?
I say house, you say housing, you say for all. Housing. Housing. I say healthcare, you say public. Healthcare. Healthcare. I say schools, you say free. Schools. Schools. I say people, you say power. People.
The SPP provides a lot of great things for you. Now, economic development is always a good thing. Now, the SPP is about liberalizing trade, and that means making it easier for money, investment, commodities to move back and forth all across the borders. But people, little people like you, and you, and you, and immigrants, and non-white people, that's not such an easy moving across the borders thing. In fact, we want to build the borders a little bit higher to prevent that kind of easy, flexible movement of people across borders. We want to share our security intelligence. We want to have CSIS and the Mexican state and the FBI and the CIA and the National Security Association. We want them all together, all in the same room, all sharing knowledge about the little people like you, and you, and you, and you. And so I think that's great, all this coming together, because we had the war on terror, we had George Bush, we had patriotism, and we had, 9/11, that was good for me, by the way, real turning point. 9/11, all this war on terror, all this kind of jack up the state, bring more military. And then we had the little trade agenda of the 1990s, the WTO, the NAFTA, the FDA, getting sort of left behind. And what to do, because Bush said, it's the homeland before trade. Why not bring homeland security and the multinational corporations together? Why not have the CEO and the army guys in the same room? I mean, that's capitalist imperialism. It's been happening all the time. And once I saw them getting the army guys and the CEOs together, once I saw tanks and McDonald's side by side where they should be, I thought, that's the organization for me. That's the organization I want to join. The SPP, right?
Stop! The SPP!
Stop! The SPP!
But I'm troubled, brothers and sisters. I am troubled, and let me tell you why. Because there is resistance. And in the 1990s and up until 9/11, this resistance was very troublesome to my bosses, to the dark lords who paid my check, right? They were troubled by the hundreds of thousands of you, the little people, who got together to big numbers and came out to stop the WTO in Seattle, the FTA in Quebec City, APEC here in Vancouver. And I said to them, oh my God, if the SPP taps into that tradition of resistance, that same tradition that got 35,000 people out here in these streets the first day of the Iraq War, which, by the way, I quite love now, well, then there's going to be trouble. But I said to them, don't worry about it. Resistance will never be a problem for the SPP as long as all the people don't act in solidarity with each other. As long as Indigenous people don't act in solidarity with refugees and immigrants, as long as gays and lesbians don't act in solidarity with workers, we're safe. But if that solidarity happens, if the mass movements boldly move forward, if the thousands of people come out across the continent today and tomorrow on the Continental Day of Action, and if people use the very confrontational tactics of direct action that shut down some of the most powerful organizations in the world, well, then we're boned. So I said to my bosses, I said to them, I quit. And so now I join you.
I say defeat the, you say SPP, defeat the, SPP. 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 Defeat the.
BMD, we want no part of BMD. Let's keep our skies completely weapons free. And you see, we don't want to lose control of our energy, water too. And don't forget our currency. To harmonize is wrong, we need our country strong. We have no urge to merge. Hey!
By making our voices heard in opposition to this garbage discussion about the SPP. So let's hear it if you're like me, you're angry about the SPP. Make some noise if you want freedom and movement for people, not capital. Make some noise if you think it should be easier for a person to get across the border than their security files. My name's Charlie Damaris. I'm a proud member of StopWar.ca. I'm your co-host and MC today. And I'd like now to introduce my co-host and MC and comrade in arms, Ms. Carleen Pickard from the Council of Canadians.
Thank you, and how wonderful to see everybody out today. We have been doing a lot of work to bring together this mobilization, but also to join with people across Canada and across the United States and in Mexico today who are saying no to the SPP and no to the summit that's taking place in Monte Bello. So we're here today to learn more about the SPP, educate people who are on the street who don't know about the SPP. Come and join us and find out the information that we have here. We have a list of great speakers who are going to help us get everything together and just feel like we're joining the at least, I think it's like three dozen rallies across the country, and especially being standing with the people in Monte Bello as they're there right now. Thank you. Francisco Juarez was serving with the Canadian Forces, and at a certain time when he realized that the Harper administration was taking the war in Afghanistan in a direction that was different from what he believed he was going to be doing in the military, he chose to step away from the Army. So he's here to speak with us.
Well, it certainly is to see so many good friends here today. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. It's great to be here to voice criticism to what we all know to be one of the greatest political hypocrisies ever handed to the Canadian public. Don't worry, they say. What's being discussed is not very important, and it's not very significant, is it? Bullshit. The Conservatives have spent every precious minute of their minority mandate to wave the flag and establish a new model of what it is to be Canadian, supposedly. And today, they continue negotiations to in fact give away many of the publicly owned sectors and hard fought for rights and protections. Shame, indeed shame. To give the Canadian Forces a mandate as occupiers and to trumpet what is best about being Canadian while selling off what is truly public property is absolute hypocrisy. In the Conservatives, we have a government that laments the state of women's rights in Afghanistan while doing nothing for them here. A government that decries endemic poverty and lack of education in Afghanistan while presenting no substantive plans for tackling the issues in Canada. The Harper hypocrisy exposes his slavish devotion to the pillars of the Conservative agenda. We are told continuously that we are in Afghanistan to provide humanitarian aid. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is an absolute lie. The federal Conservatives' only interest in communicating to Canadians about humanitarian projects there is as anesthesia to confuse and to distract while advancing the policies of globalization. Indeed. In Vietnam, many of these same tactics were used. Many of the same tactics in Vietnam. Provide cheap vaccines to a poor and sick populace for peanuts and gain favor and support. But the fact of the matter is that this was done to soften resistance, and gains were only sporadic and temporary, as the area eventually erupted again in violence. Real humanitarianism looks completely different outside of the umbrella of military operations. As long as the military runs the distribution of aid, we will see no measured and long-lasting peace within Afghanistan. In Vietnam, we saw the indigenous military and paramilitary training for that regime, what was called then Vietnamization. Again, history repeats itself, and the Conservatives have begun to use similar tactics in what can now be called Afghanization. The Army's role, as they define it, is to close with and destroy the enemy. We should not be fooled into thinking otherwise. Absolutely. So today, I am proud, as a former member of the Armed Forces, to announce the creation of Military Communities Speak Out, an online forum and information resource center for military families, veterans, and serving members dedicated to criticism and perspective on Canada's mission in Afghanistan. We're coming together. We're coming together. You can find it as milcomspeakout.ca, and it is a site for those unsatisfied by government policy and the bias of the uncritical corporate media. We offer a meeting place for current and former members of the military to add their stories. If you have family members or loved ones in the military and you are opposed to this war, join us. Please. Thank you very much.
The three amigos have conspired to integrate this continent. Behind closed doors, it was their intent to strip us of our sovereignty. SNPP is the grand design to transport water, gas, and trucks. Across borders, will there be borders? From Mexico to Tectonica. The U.S. Army and our Mounties will guarantee that we don't see where Bush and Harper and Calderon weave their web of treachery. In Monte Bello, all three fellows will be trampling on our rights. Harper is yellow, a big marshmallow. He will bark when Bush bites.
She's a member of the Canadian Auto Workers. She's the co-chair of StopWar.ca. Please put your hands together for Ms. Mabel Elmore.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, we're all gathered here today, and we can say thanks to George W. Bush for that. We're here because he's come to Canada. And I think on behalf of Canadians, we can deliver a message to George Bush here. And on behalf of Canadians, I think we can say war criminals are not welcome in Canada. The U.S. war in Iraq is in violation of international humanitarian law. The war, invasion, and destruction of Iraq is a crime against humanity. And Vancouver is the only city in the world that has successfully filed a case to charge George Bush as a war criminal. Thanks to the work of Gail Davison and BC Lawyers Against War. And the U.S. war in Iraq is part of the so-called war against terror. And maybe some of you baby boomers from the 60s might be familiar that it's replaced the Cold War against communism. And what we're seeing now is actually in reality a war against our civil liberties. The war against terror has resulted in, surprise, surprise, record high oil prices and obscene profits for oil companies. And isn't it a surprise that war is so good for business? And we have here the participation of our Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, with Canadian participation in the second front against the war and terror with Canadian troops in Afghanistan. And I think we can say, bring the troops home, Canadian troops out of Afghanistan. The three amigos in Monte Bello, they're discussing the SPP. I've got some questions. What exactly are they discussing behind the closed doors that aren't open to the media, that aren't open to labor leaders or environmentalists or to anybody except if you're one of the top 10 CEOs in Canada?